Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Welcome to another episode of the Theater Podcast. I'm Alan Seals, and this is a podcast with intimate, personal conversations with some of theater's biggest names. This episode in particular is no different. We are talking today with Chad Kimball, who currently is starring as one of the many ensemble cast, the amazing cast from Come From Away, based on the true story of the people of Gander, Newfoundland, who took care of thousands of people that were grounded during 9/11. But before that, long before that, he got his start on Broadway in Civil War in 1999, off-Broadway revival of Godspell in 2000. He was in Into the Woods, then Good Vibrations, Lennon, Memphis, for which he got a Tony nomination for that, for originating the lead role in Memphis, and then now, of course, Come From Away. He's appeared in regional theater all over the place, Paper Mill Playhouse. He's been in the Blank Theater in Los Angeles. He's a native of Seattle, which is new for me to interview somebody from Seattle, but just an all-around great guy. Interestingly enough, we get into some of his past demons, including he actually injured himself during Memphis and got addicted to some bad things, and turned to some other bad things to kind of deal with it. So we get into all of this during the episode, and but it's incredible. He's a very nice guy. So please enjoy this episode here with Chad Kimball.
Here you go, 1, 2, 3.
He got his Broadway debut in Civil War in 1999, was in the off-Broadway revival of Godspell in 2000. He was in Into the Woods in 2002, Good Vibrations in 2005, the Lennon musical also in 2005, Memphis, of which he got a Tony nomination for originating that lead role in 2009. And since August, correct, of 2016, you've now been in Come From Away. Yeah, do I have that right?
It was May of 2015. Actually, we started in La Jolla then.
Okay, well, Chad Kimball, thank you for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. You've done lots of regional theater and at the Paper Mill Playhouse and Michael John LaCusa's Little Fish at the Blank Theater in Los Angeles. But of course, as we always do, we'll get to that. But I want to back up to being a wee little Chad in Seattle.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, how did you? What was your childhood? How did you end up in Seattle?
My great grandfather Lars Larsen, from, you guessed it, Norway, came from Norway, and apparently this Puget Sound is reminiscent of the fjords in Norway. So a lot of Norwegian people went there. I don't think that's the only, and I think there was great fishing. So I think that's how he kind of got there, and that's how. That's where I grew up. I was the kin of a fisherman who called his boat the Bull Moose.
Oh, so he actually moved there to fish?
Yeah, he moved there to fish and to set up a homestead.
Your family's still there fishing?
They are. Well, they're not fishing, but they are still there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what kind of childhood did you have? Was it filled with musical theater? I mean, how did you get from, I assumed you work on the fishing boat as a little kid. Yeah?
No, there was no, I didn't even know him. But
really?
I mean, I did learn fishing from my grandfather, but not in a grand capacity. I mean, we put hot dogs on a line and see what we got. It was mainly flounder and rockfish. But I learned music actually in church. I grew up going to a church, Christian church in Seattle, and my dad was the hymn leader, and so music was just kind of a part of our household. We had a piano, and my mom would play a little bit, and they'd get rehearsed for Sunday morning, and so it was just kind of in our bones as kids. And from there, I actually didn't know that I could sing very well until I got to high school. And I went to a high school called Roosevelt High School, which is a nationally acclaimed high school for performing arts and drama. And it was there that I kind of realized that I could sing. And And so from there, I also took vocal jazz, and actually that had a rather large influence on my vocal ability. We sang, jazz almost every day in vocal jazz, and I remember every Wednesday it was Improv Wednesday, so we'd all, we'd get the tunes underneath us, and we'd one by one just get up on the mic and improvise, like scat.
I was going to ask you if you could scat.
Like totally scat, and it was so much fun. And so that kind of was a real great foundation, especially for music like Memphis. And so from there, it kind of just no. The interesting is that nobody really stopped me. I don't remember anybody putting up a roadblock in front of me or saying like, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. Everybody was just always very encouraging, and I listened back at some of the tapes. Yes, I said tapes, the cassette tapes of those times, and like, ooh. Yeah, well, I was learning. So, but that was the kind of musical background of my childhood, and of course, from there, I applied to 2 colleges, and I ended up going to the Boston Conservatory, which people say is the Boston Conservatory of Music. It's actually the Boston Conservatory Music, Dance, and Theater. So I was in the theater portion of that, but it all kind of bleeds together.
Oh, where was the other school you applied to?
NYU. I was waitlisted.
Oh,
yeah.
I bet they're sad now.
That's fine. My wife went to grad school at NYU, so it makes up for it,
It
right?
evens out, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any siblings, or is it just?
I do. I have
just
an
you?
older brother, Todd, and a younger sister, Jill. Both of whom are not in the acting business.
No, not at all.
No.
Were you the black sheep of the family then, or you said you were supportive, so probably not black sheep. But.
No, yeah. Actually, I was really incredibly shy until I was. I'm still a little shy. It's so weird. You hear actors say that they're shy, and you're like, okay, well, you get up and perform in front of thousands of people a night. But there is this aspect of, I think, being shy and theater actually being a great place for you to compartmentalize your shyness, because there's definite boundaries. You know where the audience is. You know what the scene is. So you can kind of interact in those social situations without having to be completely, thrown to the wind. But I was really shy. And when I think it was 9, my brother had been in theater. He did children's theater, summer stage at Children's Theater, Seattle Children's Theater. And they were doing this big TV pilot in Seattle called, what was it called? Oh my goodness. Adventures on Sinclair Island. I don't even think you'd be able to find it on IMDb.
I've never heard of it.
Nobody has heard of it. But I said to my brother, I said to my mom, I said, I want to go. I want to audition for that. And they all looked at me like I was crazy and that I was going to fail miserably because I was so shy. They thought I was going to get up in front of everybody and just not do anything. But I ended up, my brother and I had to improvise a scene. I got the role, and he didn't. And then he quit acting after that.
Do you think
like my shy kid brother beat me out for a role, so I'm done. I'm kidding, Todd.
He's gonna write in angrily, like, how dare you?
No, he's fine. He was really happy for me. And then so from there, I just kind of got the bug, acting bug, and just knew that I wanted to do it.
It's funny you mentioned being shy. I've talked to a lot of people over my years in this business, and so many people are in the exact same boat. They're just like, this is their way of expression, and this is their way of finding who they are and exploring their psyche. And I think correct me or I guess agree with me if you do the same thing. But I find that a lot of people use their characters to explore parts of themselves that they may not be comfortable going to.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think as a kid, I didn't know any of that. It just was kind of doing that. And, but that is definitely some of the psychology of being an actor. And like I said, it's almost, being on stage is almost almost a safer space to explore, social environments than just like a party.
Mhm.
Because you're kind of just, it's all random and you don't know what's going to happen. But when you're on stage in a play, you kind of have these boundaries and you know exactly what's going to happen and you know how it's going to end. And so it feels a lot better. But yeah, I'm still, a little shy, but I'm better.
Do you think it's helped you? Like, you're being on stage and being in front of thousands of people a night, has that helped you in the party situation? The party scene?
I don't really partake much in the party scene anymore, but I think, well, I mean, I think alcohol always played a big role in helping, alcohol helps people, kind of loosen their inhibitions. I actually don't drink alcohol anymore, so I'm not too good in social situations. I kind of sit on a chair and talk to the people around me, and but I do think that acting and theater definitely gives an actor the ability to explore those maybe hidden parts of themselves that they wouldn't really explore on the outside. There are more gregarious people who might be able to access those places a little easier. So, yeah.
Do you have a favorite character, a favorite role that you've gotten to dive into?
I think that Huey Calhoun in Memphis was probably my favorite creation as of yet. And I think the reason is it's still somewhat a mystery to me how he came to be, because I did very little research on the actual guy. He was named Dewey Phillips, and he was on the radio in Memphis in the 50s. And, the story follows him loosely, but I did very little research into his life. I listened to a couple of recordings of him, and I had a couple of kind of defining characteristics that were kind of imparted to me by the creators, and it just kind of fell out. It just kind of fell out in rehearsal. I remember we did the first production at North Shore Music Theater in 2003, and I remember saying to my mom the night before rehearsal started, I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm on every page. I don't even know who this guy is. And he just kind of fell out. And what fell out was this kind of really asymmetrical, lanky, but not, kind of like swaying physically, this character who explored weird modulations in his voice. And I know a lot of people, some people say, you hate him, but you love him at the same time. Man, he I would say that, like, I played him as much as he played me. Like, it was a really fun role to play. And, the material obviously was a big part of that. But, yeah, that's probably my favorite role.
That sounds I guess pretty accurate. I was thinking, though, while you were describing, your conversation with your mom, you're going into rehearsal, you're cast for this role, which I want to get back to the casting in a second, but you're cast for this role, you're starting rehearsals, and you said a second ago that part of what's great about being on stage is that as a shy person, you've got the scene, you've got the lines, how
Right.
beginning begin
Mhm.
in the end. So when you're going into your first day of rehearsal without knowing what your character is,
Right.
does that give you any sort of anxiety? Do you remember that moment of, like, showing up in front of the whole cast and saying, like, okay?
Well, I think in the audition process, I think I did make a couple of choices that I hid behind, if that makes any sense. The voice and the accent were something that I kind of immediately had, and those were easy. They just came to me. Obviously, they changed over time, but that's something that I think I hid behind early on. And also the writing allowed me to kind of just follow along a little bit. So I think that I was, I think the bigger picture, the grander scheme of actually doing the show and figuring out how the parts fit together, I think that was more confusing for me. I don't think I was necessarily nervous about getting in front of the cast or the creatives. I was excited to just start working on it, and because I knew that people were kind of like, "Wait, what? You're using that voice? That's weird." Or so I remember kind of liking that kind of attention.
So that was 2009.
Right.
But yeah, so I guess we'll finish my earlier thought and go back to the audition process. So it was, you had the Lennon musical in 05, and then Memphis was 09.
Mm-hmm.
How were you involved with workshops and readings and things leading up to the opening in 09, or did you not work for those 4 years?
Well, there was we did the original production in 2003 at North Shore Music Theater, and then from there it went to Theater Works in Palo Alto.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Randy Adams, who is now one of our producers in Come From Away, he was also a producer on Memphis. He and Sue Frost and Kenny and Marlene Al-Hadif. He worked at Theater Works. And so he left Theater Works after Memphis because he knew that this was something that he wanted to help shepherd to Broadway. After that production, there was about a 3-year break. And I think that was in 2004 to 2007 that Memphis took a hiatus, and there were some rights issues involved. But so in that time, I did Good Vibrations and Lennon, and then I went out to LA and I did Little Fish out there among other assorted things. And then so there was one other workshop we did at New World Stages, actually, of Memphis. And I think in that, I want to say that in that version, like Huey died and we saw his ghost or something. It was very strange. It was a very difficult play to end because the actual ending of Dewey Phillips' life was not so nice. He was heavy into drinking, and there were some. It was just not a fun or nice story, and not that you have to wrap up a musical in a nice and fun way, but they didn't want it to go quite that far in that way. So, so there was anyway. We did have a workshop there, and then La Jolla Playhouse and Chris Ashley took over, and we had the pre-Broadway tryout. I think it was in 2007. Yes, and then we went to Seattle, and then we came to Broadway in 2009.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And in 07, I guess in Seattle, did you know it was coming to Broadway? I mean, in terms of how shows do their out-of-town tryouts, how many of them kind of just fall flat there? And how many continue on? Do you know?
I don't. I mean, I will say that the cities have changed. It's kind of, it used to be Boston. Boston was a place where you take a show out of town. Now there's a lot of shows come through Seattle, which is cool. I mean, I grew up there. But like, hey, go Seattle. But the special part about Memphis is that they gave it a lot of time to marinate, and they gave it time to get it right, and just like Come From Away as well. They did several productions before Broadway, but yeah, I think that it's difficult. I mean, if you see the lineup of shows that want to come into Broadway right now, it's a long list.
Yeah, and
there's that many theaters. But the fact that we got the Schubert Theater, like the crown jewel of the Schubert organization, I remember when I think that happened we found out in Seattle that we knew it was going to be a Schubert house, but we found out in Seattle that it was going to be the actual Schubert Theater. And so I think we knew between La Jolla and Seattle that we were definitely going to Broadway. We weren't necessarily sure when. But then it became more clear as we got into Seattle.
Well, that's fun. The whole journey. Everybody's got a different story. The journey of getting like into the writing room or the writer's workshop, and then getting it amazes me how everybody's story is different.
Yeah.
But it all culminates, of course, with this great experience
Collaboration.
on Broadway.
How does it all happen?
Oh gosh, yeah, and I mean, talking to producers and the creatives and stuff, there's just so much that goes on both sides, like in front of and behind the curtain, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm curious about all that.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I like the producing side of it.
Yeah.
I've always been one of those guys. It's like how I want to know behind the curtain. I want to lift up the hood and see how it all works. So,
Yes. Yeah.
which was sort of the impetus for starting this podcast too,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So I want to know everyone's story. I want to know
Yeah.
everyone's journey.
And it's so disparate and different. Like it's so in this business, it's just there's so many little things that can go wrong and do go wrong, and kind of sidetrack, like steer a production off the path. So yeah.
Well, anyway, enough about me. Into the Woods. You played Milky White the cow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Got really great reviews, and Milky White was normally a statue.
Right.
So,
well, a cardboard.
yeah.
Well, sorry, a wooden cutout.
Yes.
In the original production. And James Lapine and Susan Hilferty, the costume designer, had this vision for Milky White to be a puppet, and I was originally cast as a standby for Jack and Rapunzel's prince, so I wasn't on stage at all. And Kate Reinders, an accomplished Broadway veteran, she was in the show, and she was cast as Milky White. And her other duties were standing by for, Cinderella and some other things. But she was cast as Milky White, and I remember the day she came up to me and said, "Can you come and be my moral support? I'm going to talk to James Lapine about." And she had been talking to me for a while about how it was really hurting, and she was having a really hard time doing it because it's on hand crutches.
Yeah,
and it's like a kind of a. I'm not saying she couldn't do it, but she was having a hard time doing it, and she just kind of wanted out. And so we went to James Lapine, and we were at the Amundsen Theater in LA at the out of town tryout in the hallway, and she kind of broke down a little bit, so said I couldn't do it, and he kind of just sat back and like shot his eyes at me and said, "Can you do it?" And I said, "Sure," and that was that. So the costume was a little tight for me at the Amundsen, but they made a whole new costume, and I got these like cool bionic legs when we got to Broadway. I mean, on the road in LA, it was these hand crutches, very simple hand crutches, and then on Broadway they made these. You looked at it. I looked like a super hooved, Superman, super cow. It was like hydraulic, and it was spring loaded. Yeah. So, I could bound or I could run really fast across that stage. It was so much fun. And Milky White's ears, I could wiggle his ears, and I could make him chew, and I could blink his eyes, which is the best because the eyes were just the cutest things. So you blink the eyes and people would just, laugh immediately. So I was like, I have power. The puppy dog power.
How'd you control that?
Well,
was it connected to your face?
No, it's actually I had to take my hand out of the hoof, and it took a lot of like kind of costume magic and choreography to do it because we had to put silk in there actually and I wore silk armbands so that when I did take my arm out, it would just slide past the fabric and wouldn't catch. Yeah. Otherwise, you'd see it in the audience. So I slyly take my hand out of the crutch, and we had to weight it so it would stand on its own. And then I would take my hand and put it into the mask and work the ears and the eyes and the mouth. It was so much fun. And I think my favorite part was the part where he's saying goodbye. He sold him. Jack has sold him, and I guess it's goodbye, old pal. You've been a perfect friend. And I walk over and I put my hoof on his knee. And he says, "I'll see you soon again. I hope that when I do, it won't be on a plate." And then I do a huge takeout to the audience with my eyes wide open, and they just went crazy. And then he runs off, and then I run after him, and then collapse downstage left. and crawl, 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 and then collapse. And the audience just went crazy. It was so much fun. It was a lot of fun. And we had to be really careful to not upstage everybody else. There was a moment, and I will be just completely honest about this. In previews, Carrie O'Malley, the baker, the baker's wife, Stephen DeRosa, Carrie O'Malley, were downstage singing It Takes Two. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I was like 25 at the time. They're downstage singing It Takes Two. It has nothing to do with the cow. But I saw an opportunity, and I was sleeping upstage, or standing upstage. And I was like, I have nothing to do here. What am I doing? So during a preview, and I hope they don't, we've talked about it, but I hope they don't harbor any resentment. I walked down to them, and during each verse, I would look up at her, and then I would look up at him, and then I'd shake my ears. And I mean, understandably, they were not too pleased with me, and I got a bit of a talking to by James. He said, "Don't do that, don't do that." I said, "Well, I was just exploring the So we had to be careful because the power of the cow, the pow cow, was intense. People really liked it, and it was really cute. So
people love animals.
I know it. It's weird.
And it won the Tony for Best Revival that year.
Mm-hmm.
And that was your first time being around Tony Buzz. What was that like?
It was so much fun. I mean, we were, on our bus to Radio City Music Hall, the whole cast with Vanessa just it was just so much fun. We had a really great time doing that show, and not just because of, obviously the camaraderie of the cast, but the magic of that story, and Stephen and James and Jim and Yanni being, and all of the original creators involved, was just thrilling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So back up, I guess, to 1999 when you graduated from Boston Conservatory. Mm-hmm. And then you joined Civil War. That was your Broadway debut.
The funny thing is, it's not even in my playbill. It's not even in my, there's an Internet Broadway database.
Yeah.
It doesn't list it there. I was there for 3 weeks. I got cast as an ensemble swing. Mm-hmm. And I loved the music. The music was great. But it was 7 days before I graduated, I got offered the Civil War. And it just doesn't happen. It happened to me, but it really speaks to just being in the right place at the right time and being prepared. And I had the perfect song for the perfect, role and or roles, and was young and ready to do it. And so I got it, and I remember just falling in love with that music. And so I was there for I think it was like 3 weeks, and it must have been longer than that. Maybe a month and a week. But
I got 3 weeks in my notes.
Is it 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll say 3 weeks. But I did start rehearsing, so that's good. But then we were nominated for the Tony against Fosse, I think it was that year, and Fosse won, and we lost. And then the next day, obviously, Jerry Zaks came on stage and lowered the boom. And I thought I didn't know. I was so green. I was like, "Oh, the director's here." Hey, and everybody's like, "Shut up." Obviously, it was we're closing, so I was there for a little bit. It was a lot of fun. I met some people who are friends to this day, and it was, I think in a lot of ways, getting the Broadway credit out of the way freed me up a little bit, because I think a lot of people, and I do it in other ways with other kind of goals. But to have attained that one, the mythical Broadway, credit, kind of, I think, freed me up to just be a little more cavalier and choosy, I guess is a word I'd use. But I think a lot of people just, harbor that. I got to get on Broadway. I got to get on Broadway. Got to get on Broadway. And it becomes a bit of an obsession. I mean, we all do it with other things, but I'm grateful that I was able to just get that out of the way. Although I never went on stage. I never
Really?
performed. I did. They let me sing in the pit
Oh.
the last show. So I did perform technically on under Broadway.
Well, what do you look for when you're being choosy? What do you look for in a role? What really speaks to you?
Well, part of it is that I say this as a kind of a joke, but it's kind of true. I like to do new roles, and one of the reasons is I don't want to stand up to scrutiny with the other person who created it before me if I'm doing something that's already been done. But the larger passion for it is just to be able to do what I wanted to do in the beginning, was to just create something that's not been seen or done before. And so it is exciting to be able to do that. And I look for I try and look for something that's redemptive, something that you find redeeming in that person or that character towards the end or in the story. I think that's a kind of an important something I like to hold up as stories of redemption and stories of comebacks and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's noble. I always wonder what really speaks to people. So it's interesting to hear everyone's different take on all of that. But
Yeah.
speaking of originating roles, I want to go back to Huey in Memphis for a little bit. Definitely big personality. And then you got the Tony nomination for this. So we'll get two questions. One, we'll talk about the Tonys after this. But how much of what we see on stage, and it's actually available on YouTube now, the full production, right? How much was?
I think it's Amazon.
Is it?
It was on Netflix. Now it's on Amazon. I think you could probably see it there on YouTube. I'm not sure, actually.
Well, I'll find it. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
for this
I think
episode.
it's Amazon because it shows up on my Amazon Prime.
Oh, so for this character, how much of what was written on the page was you, and how much was I guess spoke to you versus what you brought to the character?
I think one of the cool parts about Huey, and I don't know how I can really take credit for it, other than like I said before, it kind of just spilled out of me. You know, one of the cool things about him is that he was so much more than what was on the page, but exactly what was on the page. And I don't really know how to articulate that, other than I was able to fill in some of the gaps that were written to be filled in. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it was all there. It just, I guess, needed, a vessel for him to spill out, and that was me. But we did the great part about working with Joe and David, Joe DiPietro and David Bryan, who wrote it, and Chris Ashley, who directed, because he's very much involved in trying to shape the story in those early days, is that we all were able to, talk about it, and I was able to, say, well, I think that he probably would have said this, or it might be more interesting if we see him, go this route, or if they have a back and forth here. So there was some of it that was in flux, but we were all able to collaborate really nicely. And if there was a word or a lilt to a line that didn't feel like Huey, Joe was very interested in collaborating and finding out a way to make it come off the page vocally in a more Huey-like way. It was theater magic, really. It was just a collaborative dream, and to be able to give input and have that input heard, and then possibly see the fruit of the input.
So you
night
were
after night.
definitely involved with shaping the character, I guess,
Yeah.
in originating it. Yeah.
Yes.
And then for the Tony nomination, how did your career change after that?
Oh man. I mean, it's just a huge honor. It's a huge, huge honor, and to be, honored by your peers in that way, and mm, you know, I don't really know how to speak to it. I mean, my career it changed only in as much as uh, it's it's like my laurels are more comfortable to sit on. That's it. Like I mean, I will say that it's just like I said, it was an incredible honor. There were some humbling factors involved, which I really appreciate because I I I, I hesitate to say that it's kind of been a touchstone for a larger capacity for creation and all that stuff, creative energy in my life, but there were some because I really feel like humility and being humble is a better way to go. Actually, on the Tony broadcast, one of those humbling moments was when you're at an award show and it's televised. They have, which I'm sure you know, they have seat fillers, and so they're all dressed to the nines, and so the cameras will, when they pan across, and whoever has left the audience to go and perform or do whatever they do backstage, there's someone in their seat. And so I had just come back from I think either performing or I forget what I was coming back to my seat, and I was in the seat, and one of the they've got these producers with clipboards and the little curly wire that goes in the ear. And she rushes over to me and she said, "Hey, so I need you to vacate and at the next commercial break." And I said, "Okay, well, I don't know why am I. What do you? I already did the thing." She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I already performed," and she's like, "Oh, so sorry," but it's just like you're like, okay,
she thought you were the seat filler.
yeah, and that's great. That's great. I'm good with that. It's just a little way for me to remember where I'm from.
Well, maybe producers don't know everybody.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody
That's right.
is nominated.
Exactly.
That's
well, there is
funny.
a sense of at that point you're like, well, you feel like maybe you are nobody, and so to be kicked down a little bit, it's good. It's healthy. It's healthy for everyone.
Well, that speaks highly of you, I guess, to take that as a humbling moment instead of being like, "I'll have your job."
It was fine.
Okay, so then fast forwarding a little bit, July 2011, you said you left Memphis for an indefinite leave of absence due to nerve damage, right? What's that story?
Oh man, that story still continues to this day. I had an injury, a pretty bad injury, during the show. And I didn't. I was so wrapped up in that character and so needing to be him and felt responsible for him and somewhat for the show a little bit, that I kind of tried to ignore the pain. And with physical pain comes emotional pain, comes all of that stuff. And it started to become a very dark time. And I got to the point where I was performing 6 shows a week, if that sometimes, because my whole right side was in the back was pretty much atrophied, and I couldn't breathe as well as I could. And because of that, I had a couple of panic attacks on stage, which are not fun, especially when you've got to do it in like a 2.5 hour show. So things just kept, kind of piling on, and I tried to really smile through a lot of the pain. And, I think also in those situations you get misunderstood by people, and it's an isolated. You feel a bit isolated in that. I was trying to go through. I was trying to just muscle my way through without really reaching out for any help. And around August, in July of 2011, we just had a meeting and said, I need to go and get better.
Mhm.
And it was really hard. And I said I'd like to stay through the second year anniversary, which, they were totally great with that. And then I left. And I kind of just like laid low and kind of, just marinated in a bit of post mountaintop misery. Can you say that? Yeah, sure. So it took me a few years to kind of get back on track.
Really?
Yeah. It was hard. Nobody kind of prepares you for being in front of so many people and being so exposed and being um, kind of it's kind of a being as a shy person growing up and kind of a more of an introvert than an extrovert, and a bit of a homebody, being thrown into that environment and not really thinking about the ramifications um, is hard. And then on top of that, being injured and then feeling emotional pain from all that and anxiety, it was a recipe for disaster. So I hit a bit of a rock bottom, and then I came back up, and things have been looking up recently.
Are you prone to anxiety in general? Is that
No, I don't think so. I think that uh, no, I don't think so. I think that everybody's got their their personal afflictions,
Mhm.
really, and everybody goes through it in a different way. And mine ended up actually in addiction. I was addicted to Adderall, which I was prescribed for attention deficit disorder. But when you're in a cycle of kind of anxiety and you're injured, um, and the toleration for the medicine is rising. It was kind of a perfect storm, and so I ended up, kind of isolating myself quite a bit and being addicted to Adderall. And finally reached out to my family, whom I was convinced would. I mean, they're the most loving people ever, but my mind was like, "Oh, you've disappointed them." And they were great. They said, "We're gonna get you help. We're gonna bring you home." My sister said, "I'm so excited." And I said, "What?" Because I called home and I said, I've got a substance problem. And she said, "Well, we finally know what's wrong with you." And there was something that we just couldn't, I did a
Yeah.
really good job at hiding it. And
They knew
so
something was
they knew
off.
something, yeah. And I'm, of course, across the country, and they were like, "What's wrong with him?" So finally I got some help. And I think the cool part about it is that there's as an actor, I feel like my motivation for acting has changed a little bit in that I now understand some of the more um, psychological reasons why people get into acting, um, and now I feel like I can focus more on uh, the work, if that makes any sense, because I've
Mhm.
got kind of a larger foundation for who I am and what I've been through and what I can pick from here and there. Yeah, it was a hard time, but I'm so glad I went through it.
Yeah. Did you go through like a rehab back in
I
Seattle? Is
did.
that yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Eastern Washington, 21 days in Sundown M Ranch. It was awesome.
Yeah?
Well, yeah, because you're laid bare. And I mean, I when I got out of rehab, I was so I had isolated myself so much, and I had I want to say deceived my friends and family so much into thinking that I was okay, which obviously I wasn't. Um, that the truth and transparency and being able to lay everything on the table to complete strangers, by the way, when you're in like group therapy, was it was just the best feeling ever.
Wow.
And so So I immediately posted on Facebook when I got out. I was like, "This is what's happened, and this is this is what I'm going through." And I just wanted to be open and transparent about it. It's probably one of the better things that I've ever done. And not that I think that everybody's paying attention to me, but for people who were thinking that something was wrong, or that uh, it was kind of a, oh, okay, I understand now.
Hmm.
And there were relationships that I had to repair and still have to repair, but that gets you into um, being able to repair relationships and make amends with people. Acting is about human relationships, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it's about how we react and act in our human relationships. And so I think that has even been kind of a boon and a blessing to my craft, if you like, in that I'm way more keen on how people work, and emotional language that I didn't understand before.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm glad for it.
Do you see any of these patterns, I guess, of maybe being addicted to the high of performing in like any of the younger ensemble or younger leads that you're performing with now? And have you? I guess if you ever seen the need to be like, hey, you got to slow down here because I've been there. You're
Yeah,
gonna hurt yourself.
yeah. But I also remember, I know a couple of people when I was kind of on that tear, said, and looking back, I didn't remember, didn't think much of it at the time, but like, hey, are you okay? Is everything okay? And I didn't pay much attention to it, but now I get it. Now I know. And of course, you see people who are on a they're being shot out of a cannon, a much larger cannon than I was shot out of. I don't know how some of these kids in Hollywood do it. I mean, and we sit back and we think, oh well, they've got everything, but they're a human being,
Yeah.
and they must be going through the ringer. I mean, so many people are trying to control them and trying to, on a much grander scale than I ever was. But yeah, I think it was, what was it? Malcolm Gladwell's book, the turning, is it Tipping Point? The Tipping Point. I
Hmm.
think he talks about how, as human beings, we're supposed to like know we're like 150 people max. Like that's our community.
Yeah.
But on Facebook, we know thousands. Like we're expected to know so many people, and we're expected to be in front of thousands of people. And it's just we're not created that way. We're not made that way.
Yeah, and I remember where I heard this. It's like we're psychologically we can only have like 7 close friends
Yeah.
or something. It's like
Yeah.
you can count on both hands the
Right.
close friends you really can pay attention to.
Right. So
Yeah.
the modern era is a little tough on our caveman brain.
Well, we fall in love with our electronics because all
Well,
the
yeah.
all the likes, all the the
The
comments,
notifications.
the notifications. That's all serotonin
Oh, the
release.
dopamine. Just
Dopamine,
like,
serotonin.
yeah.
So chemically, all these likes you get from your posts are the same as when you look at someone you love.
Yeah.
It's really
It's
scary.
weird.
But
Yeah.
anyway, that's a whole different podcast. Gosh, we've been talking. I want to talk about Come From Away for a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's what you're doing now. For those who don't know, it's based on a true story of on 9/11. There was a bunch of commercial planes, 38 planes that were grounded in Gander, Newfoundland.
Mhm.
I love this show. I absolutely love it. I had some friends that went to see it the other night.
Oh, nice.
Who loved it.
Good.
Um,
It's a perfect one to send to your friends.
It is. When I first heard, a 9/11 musical,
Right.
what?
Yeah.
I was skeptical. I gotta
Sure.
admit, and then it's one of my all time favorite shows,
Oh, that's awesome.
and it just works, and it's like 90 minutes, no intermission, right?
Right. Just goes.
As soon as it starts, it just keeps
Mhm.
going. So how did you get involved with that? It seems like you've had background with Chris
With the
Ashley,
director and the
yeah.
producers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But they called me in like any other audition and asked if I was interested in this piece, and I read it and I cried and I thought, how's this going to work? This is insane. It's a 9/11 musical. But I knew that there was I knew there was a level of emotional immediacy and urgency there that couldn't be ignored. And so I was obviously interested in going in. I went in for a completely different role. I went in for the Oz Constable role, which Gene Carr plays. And they called me back for Kevin. At the time was Colin. They changed it to the original names in Seattle. Yeah, and I went in and I auditioned just like everybody else, and got called back, and was cast for the La Jolla production, and from there it was just kind of magic. It was one of those, theater magic moments where the right people come together at the right time, and it feels like it was meant to be.
Is every character in the show based on someone real?
Yes. Every single character is based on. There are a lot of little characters we play that were actually characters in bigger scenes that they had to cut. But everybody is based on somebody that actually existed and did what the characters do.
Doing construction in the other room, apparently. Yeah. So sorry about the construction noise.
It's all right.
Yeah. So everybody's based on real characters. Did you get to meet the characters that you play?
Oh, yeah.
They're the real people that you play?
We know them very well. I mean, we when we opened on Broadway, most of them were there to bow with us. So we had our counterparts there bowing with us, which was crazy. And it's like you don't really in theater, you don't know the people you play, and if you do, it's it's maybe not as happy a story, and but the fact that we know all these people and we're actually friends with them, and they were doing the show in Seattle, and just recently the tour opened in Seattle, and I would get a text from my mom. She's like, "I'm having dinner with Beulah, who's one of the main characters in the show," and I was like, I don't understand. And it turns out that the guy who works at the grocery store that we've gone to all of our lives, his best friend was grounded one of the plane people in Gander, and stayed at Beulah's house. So Beulah came to Seattle for the opening night, and then ended up having dinner with my mom.
Oh, that's so fun.
It's just this crazy, you just never expect to have relationships with the people you play quite as vociferously as we do.
So did they still come and see the show at all?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
I mean, Beverly Bass has seen the show, I think I think she's up to 120.
Yeah, I saw somebody posted on
She's like
Instagram the other day.
Yeah, I think she's the most. And then there are a couple other. Kevin, the one that I play, he's only seen the show like 30 times. He likes to brag. He's like, I've only seen it 30 times. Yeah, so they come a lot, and of course we're just there with open arms. My goodness,
Jesus. The construction. I don't know if we can edit out
hallway
that.
theater.
Yeah, hallway theater.
We'll just go with it.
All right. Well, there we go. This is live theater. The podcast interview must go on. So, goodness. I totally lost my train of thought. Okay, well, blah, blah, blah. What do you hope to do next? You've been in Come From Away for a couple of years here. So do you foresee yourself sticking around for a while, or what do you hope you get into next?
Construction. I'm having such a great time, and the audiences are so new. And when I say new, I mean that they're so eager for the show. And even if you've seen it before, even if you've seen the show, it moves so quickly and is so emotionally charged that seeing it again is almost like seeing it for the first time. I feel like, and there's this kind of thing in theater where like, oh yeah, the audience is the other cast member, and yeah, that's true. But in this instance, in this show, I've never experienced an audience so involved in each moment of the show, and it's the level of curiosity and the level of openness that the audience shows emotionally is stunning. And I think mainly it's because once we say in the show, some of the characters in the beginning say where they were on that day, and I remember growing up hearing where were you when JFK was shot, and that just immediately brings people into an emotional place.
It connects everybody.
It does, and so I think that moment kind of just you and then you don't get a chance to inspect your emotional where you are emotionally. You don't get a chance to try and tamp down any type of emotion because you're just going to the next scene, and that's one of the brilliant pieces of direction by Chris is just keeping it going and not really allowing you to respond to your own emotionality, and then you get the pure theatrical experience that you paid for, which is to
it's fresh.
Yeah,
it's fresh every night, and I've seen it a couple times, and it's always a different show.
Yeah,
it's the same script, but it's a different show every night. Yeah. Real quick, I want to touch on your personal life. You got married last year.
I did.
Thank you.
Well,
congratulations.
Yeah, last
Thank
year.
you.
It's been 5 months. 5 months ago.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So very recent.
Very
so
recent.
Emily Swallow, fellow stage and TV actor. Do you
Yes.
find it? Do you find it easier or harder to have married a non-civilian, a fellow actor?
I think it's much easier. I think because we both, we speak the same emotional language and we speak kind of the same professional language, and I think that that's a boon to our relationship. And she's also, I've learned so much from her as far as how to prepare, and I think she's learned a bit from me. I would say maybe. I hope she has. Honey, have you? And but she's. We work really well together too. So we've never done anything professionally together, but we, in preparation for projects and things, we work really, really well together. So I think it's a blessing that we've found each other.
You put together a cabaret act or something.
Right?
Yeah.
Something.
She put together like a couples cabaret series, like reach out to Andy, Carl, and Orfeh.
Oh my gosh, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, so like the four of you can go out and just do like this. You call it couples therapy.
Couples therapy.
There you go.
A little web series.
Yeah.
Married Broadway couples.
Yeah, I'd watch that. I'd pay to see that. Anyway, that's free for you. You can take
a good
that.
idea. I like it.
So we'll wrap up here because we've been chatting for a good amount of time here. We have 3 closing questions that I always ask people on the podcast. So the first one, very simply, what motivates you?
Hope, I think. I've got hope that they're fun and exciting and fulfilling opportunities ahead.
What advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now starting out down a similar path?
Oh man. I mean, I want to be able to live the same kind of life because I don't want to the things I've learned are hard fought, hard won. But I would say don't think that being rejected is because it's not a judgment on who you are or what your talent level is. It's just because you weren't exactly the right thing that they wanted. I think a lot of people, and me included, kind of self-sabotage a little bit that way, and thinking that rejection is, it's so weird. Like they want you, but then they reject you. Like you are wanted when you come into that audition.
Mm-hmm.
They want you to be the perfect person. So, so I'd say, don't think of rejection in such harsh terms.
Cool. So final fun question. If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Oh man. Sweeney Todd.
All right. That is the second answer for a second person who said Sweeney Todd.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. It's stunning. And it's yeah. I think maybe like the 100th time I'd start to find the major humor.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, people can connect with you on Instagram at Chad Kimball 76. I guess there were 75 other Chad Kimballs.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's not my birth year.
No, not at all. Twitter, Chad Kimball 1.
That's right.
Yeah, you're the first.
I'm number one.
Yep. And then Facebook.com/Chad Kimball fan page.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you can get more of me and the Theater Podcast at theater_podcast on Instagram and Twitter, Facebook.com/official theater podcast. And listen and subscribe, always thetheaterpodcast.com. Wherever you're listening now, please rate and review. I love reading reviews. This is produced by Jillian Hockman, and music you're hearing now for the intro and outro is by Jukebox the Ghost, our wonderful friends. Chad Kimball, thank you again for this lovely conversation.
Thanks
This
for
was
having
great.
me. Thank you.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.